Good morning. Before we begin, I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. Yes? Okay. So nice to see so many new and familiar faces. My name is Christina Dauber, and I'm the Palomar College CalWorks counselor and Region 10 representative. Welcome to Palomar College's second annual Many Faces of Women in Leadership, Rising into Our Power. To give you a little history and context about this event, we started it last year as a way to honor and celebrate National Women's History Month. The idea behind the first event was twofold: to showcase the rich diversity and complexity of women's leadership, and to provide a space where current women leaders could share their stories in a raw and courageous way so that the audience might feel inspired not by their accomplishments, but by their humanity. It's my hope that at some point this morning you have a moment where you say to yourself, wow, she's telling my story, and that resonance inspires you to lead with more conviction, compassion, and energy in your organizations, in your classrooms, in your communities, and even in your families. So let us begin. Many of you may know our first panelist this morning, as she is a dearly loved CPB alum who has remained very involved in supporting the program. Doctora Johanna Malaret is a bilingual, bicultural Puerto Rican, bisexual queer woman who grew up in New Jersey and has been a Californian for the last 18 years. She has a master's in education with a concentration in multicultural counseling and social justice from San Diego State University, and a doctorate in clinical psychology from the California School of Professional Psychology at Alliant International University. She is currently preparing to start a private practice and works on project coordination for crisis counseling response teams, working with low-income and undocumented Latinas, Latinos, and Latinx. Dr. Johanna Malaret.
Good morning. Am I unmuted? Everybody can hear me? Okay. Happy International Women's History Month. I'm really honored to be asked by Dr. Christina to be a part of this. It's one of my favorite months of the year, aside from September, which is my birthday, of course, and just a great month in general. But and also really excited to be talking to a great group of individuals, and particularly community college students, which I have a really strong passion for. So let's begin. I'm going to read my poem, The Rising into My Power. I am from the brick apartment building in New Jersey, from Two Worlds and Fievel. I am from the ceiba tree, whose strong roots are anchored to the earth, from Malaret and Gracia. The path I have walked has not always been easy. It has been marked by pain and trauma. I have felt sadness and shame, but I know that it has made me fearless. Like a coqui, I sing and soar. When I falter, I will remember that I am a survivor and I carry the strength of my Puerto Rican and Taino ancestors deep inside of me. I carry Madre Tierra in me and walk in harmony with the world. I see myself thriving and know that while the road may be long, I will rise into my power. My dream, wish, hope for us is that everyone gets to be their authentic self and live in their power. And I know we can get there if we love self and others. I really like this idea of this collective poem that we all are hopefully doing, or if not doing now at some point. do that for yourself. So, gosh, I'll begin by saying that sort of, I think my personality, the way that my brain works is that I sort of meander on my journey and eventually get there. So you'll probably experience that in these 20 minutes as well. um, so, to give a little bit more background, Dr. Christina shared a little bit about myself and, my educational 411, right? So I am a only child of Puerto Rican parents. I was born and raised on the East Coast and have been out here in California for about 18 years now. So I guess I consider myself a California Rican. And so, as you noticed in my bio, and I said in my poem, two worlds, like dualities have always sort of been very present in my life, being bilingual, being bicultural, when I would go to school in a predominantly, I wouldn't say, it wasn't rural, it was like suburbanish, predominantly white, where I grew up. When I was at school, it was one world. And then when I came home and closed the door, it was like Puerto Rico, right? So it was very different. And then as life evolved and when I came to accept my sexuality, where I also identify as bisexual queer. So there was another duality, right? And so I'm now bicoastal. So having born and raised and spent a significant amount of my time on the East Coast, and then now having experienced life on the West Coast. And so I think that has been an anchor in my life, that notion of navigating two world and navigating multiple things. I think as many of us do as women of color, different intersectional identities. And so that is one of my sources of my strength, that has helped and assisted me in thriving, in dealing with the challenges, dealing with adversity, and also, has given me so much that I am forever thankful for and would never want to be different. I consider myself a mental health advocate and an activist. Maybe I don't, I think it's shifted as time has gone by and age. I'll be honest, my activism looks a little different than when I was younger. And that has always been to some capacity present. And I think that's been fueled by my own personal experiences of challenges and adversity, experiencing trauma when I was young that led me to, it's informed who I am. I mean, I have the belief that your experiences don't necessarily define you, but I do definitely think they inform you. And it changes over the course of time, whether it informs you in healthy or unhealthy ways, whether it adds things or subtracts things, whether that be at the same time or at different times. And so when I was in college is when, I think I began to kind of understand what my experiences, how my experiences had impacted me, and not knowing it at the time, but I started to experience PTSD, which at that time, wasn't even PTSD technically. And I ended up going to therapy. Not really, to a degree, having a sense of what therapy was, but not ever anybody really talking to me about therapy. I remember being on the bus. I went to Rutgers back on the East Coast. And for anybody who knows, it's a big university and sort of across cities. So we would have to take, the big, like regular bus, right? And I saw this flyer for this place called 56 Place, and I was intrigued and I looked into it, and it was like a peer counseling program. And that was like my first taste, I would say, of the counseling experience. But as I mentioned before, like being involved, being active in my community, being a volunteer was always something that called to me. And so in high school, I was active in different things. And so I say that to say that for me, volunteering, um, giving back to the community has been a huge source of salvation, and of just enjoyment and thriving. And so I encourage everybody not to volunteer if that's not your thing, but I mean, to listen to yourself. I think if anything to take away from today, I'm sure this is probably going to resonate in some of the other great speakers that we'll be hearing, is the power of your intuition as women, as individuals, and to listen to yourself, which is not always easy. We get a lot of messages not to, and with a lot of the racism and sexism that exists in the world, we're often squashed, and literally and figuratively, unfortunately. And so I think me listening to that when I started to have those experiences in college where I was having, a difficult time, like, when I would be walking and I would have somebody who I would hear was, I would hear footsteps in back of me, and that, caused me a lot of worry and stress, and what I, now I understand is anxiety, and, eventually sought therapy for. And in that experience, again, I didn't necessarily know what was happening, right? And I didn't maybe understand everything till much later, but that piece, that part of me that knew that it was important to listen to myself, which is not something that has been strong at all points in my life. I mean, I've struggled with being in touch with my own voice and being able to share how I feel. And, I mentioned in the poem sadness, and I may have dated myself because I mentioned Fievel. So if anybody maybe who has kids may know this, or depending on your age, it was the character in the cartoon American Tail. And so I had the stuffed animal Fievel. And so, the poem, when it said, about products or objects from your past, like Fievel popped up for me because I had Fievel when I was, I guess like early teen or so. And I would often cry at night, and I would have, Fievel would be, what was like sort of my comfort. And maybe at times I knew I was crying, maybe at times I didn't, I'm not saying that my childhood or that my, high school experience was this awful experience. It was not. It was great in many ways. But it was also difficult to navigate those two worlds of being a Puerto Rican, being a Latina, but kind of like navigating in this white world. Even though I have white skin privilege, I always, my experiences felt very different than my peers. And I've always been like a plus size fat woman. And so that was always, not always a challenge, but that was definitely a challenge in high school, right? When everyone around was not. And so I got kind of dismissed in many ways and looked over, and it was in ways that were very, from minimal to large. And so that's also, kind of informed my journey. So for me, therapy, again, I'm kind of, flowing back and forth. So therapy really changed my life. It was a great experience. And I loved it. And I don't think I knew, because I did not see people around me in my immediate circle or my families who had gone on to higher education. So I didn't know what it meant to get an advanced degree, to be, that you could really be a doctor. And it didn't mean that you were going to be like a medical doctor. And then when I started to understand that more in college, the thought of a dissertation, like, I'll be honest, it scared the crap out of me, because I was like, Like, I always stressed and thought I hated writing. But, as I've come to understand myself, like I say things because I either see things or I feel things. And so, I said to myself, oh, not even knowing what that meant, like, oh, I wanted to be a psychologist and work with college students. And, again, that long winding journey that is Joanna, for those that know me. I did that. And I will get to that again. During my clinical training as a clinical psychologist, I worked at university counseling centers and was able to provide mental health services to college students and loved it. And it was and is a phenomenal experience. So am I saying everybody needs therapy? Yes. Am I saying everybody needs therapy? No, it's an individual choice. Everybody could benefit from, learning about themselves and growing, because that's really what, therapy is. But my point of this talk is not to be, rah rah for therapy. Well, a little bit it is, of course, right? I'm sharing what my personal experience, what has helped me. And so therapy. So volunteering, as I said, I've always been involved in, and that's how I became involved in LGBT activism is, volunteering at college and being part of starting up with another friend that I met, a specific group for Latinos. We were the first group for Latino LGBTQ students on our campus. And our campus was actually, and historically has been one of the most LGBT affirming, had one of the earliest LGBT, they probably might have called it like the gay center before or what have you, but yet I still didn't feel part of it, and ironically, I also didn't necessarily feel part of the Latino community. I remember, the I don't know what the official name of it, maybe it was like the Latino Cultural Center was right across from one of the major dining halls. And I remember I would just kind of look at it and felt like I couldn't go in there because I didn't belong, because maybe I didn't look like other Latinas, or I had my own struggle of connecting with my culture because of, some of the trauma that I experienced. And so, I finally literally got myself to kind of walk in there. But yet I didn't quite feel like I fit in because I already knew that I was questioning my sexual identity. And so again, here comes that piece of those dualities, right? Where you walk into one sphere and it doesn't quite fit because you don't see or feel other parts of yourself. And then you walk into the other sphere. So when I walked into the white world, I was like, where's my Latino-ness? But then when I walked in the Latino world, I was like, where was my queerness? Where was my acceptance there? And in getting involved in volunteering and, doing the group and then volunteering off campus is how I began my journey of becoming, an LGBT activist that was tied in with, HIV activism. I was born and raised in the time when HIV became prevalent in our world and our consciousness. And so that is another piece of, how I began my career as an activist. And I'm really thankful and have been able to go back and serve individuals living with HIV throughout, even before I officially got into mental health. Let me know when my time is up, because I know I'm trying to keep track of it.
You're good. You have a few minutes still.
Okay, perfect. So I guess I'll start to wrap up and I think I've said it without saying it in the course of the discussion a little bit, is the power of adversity, right? Which is sort of ironic to say that there's power in adversity because, adversity by definition is something that is challenging, generally perceived as negative. I feel that adversity is something that in varying levels everybody experiences. I feel pretty positive everybody experienced some level of adversity. Some of us, the volume is on way high for adversity, and it's on for really long times, for consistent periods of times, right? And then it goes down low, or it goes off, or it comes back on again. And the reality is that it is a part of life, as is breathing. And so it's how we take in and what we do with our adversity that I think where our source of power is. We can learn from it. The lessons are painful at times, more oftentimes than not they are. But there are lessons, and we can grow from them. And our adversity does not have to define us. I think it informs aspects of who we are. And for some of us, it can inform our lives very strongly. So for anybody who is struggling right now, has struggled, will be struggling in the next day, week, months, years, know that you do have the ability to get through things, and to thrive, and to still be your authentic self once you allow yourself to seek support, because it's not easy to live in a world where there's so much just ugliness, many of us have seen significant ugliness this year. Many of us choose not to, right? Many of us ignore it, and have seen it throughout our lives and through the centuries, and see it in our own lives. And, I encourage everybody to get support, whether it be your friends, family, professionally, so that you could allow yourself the opportunity to thrive and live your authentic best life, which it is possible. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to have moments where it's going to be painful and hard, and you're going to have shameful moments and memories. And that is a part of life. And that is the beauty of life, right? Because it can't all be walks in the park and roses. It isn't for anybody, even though sometimes we look at it, right? Especially with social media nowadays, it's so much easier to have the perception that, oh, everyone's life is so great, everything is so fantastic. It's not. People hide a lot of things, and hide who they are for a variety of reasons, right? Personally or collectively, or a combination of both. So as I wrap up and pass the baton on to these other fantastic women that are going to be speaking, I just want to say we women are really incredible human beings, and we should celebrate ourselves all the time, not just in March, and live in your power. It is possible to live in your power, and it's a great thing when you do. So thank you for this fantastic opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Malloret. Your closing message was beautiful, and I think what you shared about duality is something that a lot of people can identify with. So I appreciate the fact that you brought that concept forward and, really peeled it off for us. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Our next panelist came highly recommended by staff and faculty from Cuyamaca Community College. Dr. Tycee Hosley has a Master of Arts in Counseling with a focus on college student services from the University of San Diego, and a PhD in education with a focus on equity and social justice from San Diego State University and Claremont Graduate University. She is currently a tenured associate professor for Grossmont Cuyamaca Community College District, as well as a social justice advocate, instructor, and curriculum developer. Dr. Hosley.
Okay. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Christina Palomar for hosting this event. I am absolutely humbled and honored to be here to speak to you today during Women's History Month. So I'll give you, let me start with actually my poem, Rising into Power. I am from a cast iron skillet, from food stamps and powdered milk. I am from a fig tree whose figs are bittersweet, from Hosley and Bonnie. The path I have walked has not always been easy. It has been marked by trauma and struggle. I have felt beaten up and depleted, but I know that it has made me resilient. Like a lion, I roar. When I falter, I will always remember I am a survivor and I carry the strength of my grandmother. I carry light in me and I walk in harmony with the world. I see myself changing hearts and minds, and I know that while the road may be long, I will rise into my power. My dream, my wish, my hope for us is that we choose love, not hate. And I know we can get there if we can all just breathe. Thank you again. And I want to just share a little bit more about myself and then sort of take you on my journey. You'll go with me. I'm a native San Diegan, born and raised in San Diego. Both sides of my family are from Mississippi. So there's a Southerner in me somewhere. I'm still trying to find her. I'm the youngest of 3 daughters. I graduated from Lincoln High School right here in San Diego. I am the mother of Leonard, Christian, and Denzel, and the grandmother, but we're gonna go with Mimi, of Mizell and Normani. That's me. As I thought about the question of adversities I had experienced and what shaped me into the person I am today, there were some things that popped up as sort of pivotal moments in my life. So as I said, I'm going to try to take you on that journey. So the first thing that popped into my mind was the experience of growing up on welfare, part of a system. I remember free food lines, and I mentioned the powdered milk in my poem, and I remember having to have cereal with powdered milk, and it wasn't tasty. It wasn't a good thing. So this stands out as not the best memory. Free cheese and peanut butter, the things that we had access to eat. I remember going school shopping at secondhand stores. I remember our gas and electricity being cut off in the house multiple times. One day in particular stands out to me because I was in middle school and it was school picture day. And you know, in middle school pictures are important. You want to look your best. And I remember waking up that morning and we had candles going, but it was dark still and I couldn't really see how to get dressed and get myself together. So that day always sticks with me. I know I knew at a young age that I didn't like living day to day. I knew I wanted a different life for myself. I didn't blame my mother, who I love and adore. I didn't blame her for the situation we were in. I just knew I wanted something different. And one of the things my mother did is pull me out of our local school, our neighborhood school, and she bused me out. She bused me out to Grant Elementary and then to a middle school. I didn't want to go, but she thought it would be the best thing for me. And what I remember about those schools, on the first day that I was bused out to Grant, I remember going to my classroom, probably 4th grade, And when it was time for reading groups, the teacher put me in the slow group. She didn't know anything about me. It was my first day. I was in a classroom of predominantly white students, and I remember being placed in that group. And I remember just wanting to sink and hide. I was a good student, and I thought, why is she putting me here? These things stand out to me in my childhood as absolutely things that shaped me. It made me want to just fight to be the best person that I could be. So I knew college was a ticket to a better life. I worked my butt off in high school, graduated with a 4.13, number 3 in my class, and I got into UC Berkeley. I went teary because I didn't want to leave my family. Our family is very close, and I thought, wait, they're going to take me here and drop me off. I don't want to go, but it was UC Berkeley. While I was there, I repeated a cycle. I became a single mother of 2 sons. Leonard was born my junior year and Christian my senior year. So if being at Berkeley wasn't hard enough, I had 2 little ones to take care of. I remember a day that sticks with me as I was thinking about this journey. There's points that stand out. I went to the grocery store one day to just try to do some shopping, and I had 2 babies. I got the cart, and I had them in their car seats, and I put one in the front part of the cart and one in the other part of the cart. And I looked down, and I remember I'm in the parking lot, and I said, I have nowhere to put groceries. And I just stood in the parking lot and I cried. And I thought, what am I going to do, and how am I going to make it? How am I going to do this? I went home that day. I didn't do any grocery shopping, but I was determined to make it work. I was determined to be successful. So one of the things that got me through UC Berkeley, because I wanted to leave and come home, was joining the Black Recruitment and Retention Center. It was a student-run organization. And I was able to join that center, and I found a community of people, one that looked like me, many that shared my experiences. But the thing I think that kept me going was in the Black Recruitment and Retention Center, one of the things we got to do was go out to high schools and reach out to other students of color and try to encourage them, motivate them, and show them that they too could do this, right? And so that was just absolutely fulfilling. And I think that's where I found my passion. I knew at that point, this is what I'm going to do. This is my life's purpose, is to help, to inspire, to empower, to motivate other people using my sort of journey and experience. So I graduated from UC Berkeley with my 2 little guys in tow. I came home and went to the University of San Diego. Got my master's degree in counseling, as Christina mentioned. I'm going to back up for just a second because there's an important point that I missed. When I returned home with my 2 little ones, I didn't have a job. I didn't have a way to financially support them. And I had to do something that I said I would never do. And that was go and apply for welfare because I needed to feed my children. And it was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. I remember how the woman treated me. She rolled her eyes. She slammed papers on the desk. And I remember her saying, you graduated from Berkeley. You can't get a job. She was horrible to me. 3 months on the system, and I took a job with my degree from UC Berkeley as a parking attendant at Ace Parking, full-time job. I knew though, as I'm going through all of this isn't the end of my story, right? It's not the end of my story. I'm gonna keep pushing. While all of this is happening, I grew up in an environment that was violent, for lack of a better way of putting it. Can't tell you how many funerals I went to before the age of 21. People being shot and killed in the community was routine. And it continued throughout the years while I was gone in college. When I returned home, late night phone calls still get my heart racing because I don't know what's going to be on the other end. My mother's brother was shot and killed outside of the home I was raised in. My cousin was killed just down the street a couple years later, and another one in the community of Spring Valley. One of the things I've had to learn how to manage is the multiple realities of my life. On the one hand, I was a college student and then a graduate student pursuing a master's and a PhD. On the other, there was a different reality of my life. I was a family member at the scene of a shooting in the middle of the night, crying, hurt, devastated that I had lost another loved one. And the next day, I would always have to return back to whatever I was doing, to school, to work, with colleagues, with peers who were so far removed from my reality that I felt like I couldn't share. So I dealt with that, a lot of it alone at the time. There was one more, I think, event that really shaped me, and that was losing my eldest sister when I was in the 10th grade. She had a pulmonary embolism, and she passed away at 23. She had a 6-month-old at the time. I've always done as much as I can for him to feel the absence of his mother not being here. I think her life being shortened has definitely pushed me every day to work to be the best version of myself, because she couldn't. I always envisioned her looking down on me, and I wanted her to be proud. So as I think about all of these things, my life has been shaped by adversity. It's been shaped by loss. It's been shaped by struggle, but also there is hope. There was hope that things could get better. And there was a lot of love. I would not be here in front of you today speaking to you had it not been for my family. I can't talk about my mother and my grandmother too much, because then I'll just probably just start crying and you won't understand much more of what I'm saying. But the amount of support I received from my family and my friends was tremendous. As I moved to thinking about what was the thing, the perspective, or the faith, or the person that helped me sort of rise above the adversity, there was something that stood out to me, and I will never forget. One of my mentors said something that is etched in my memory. He said, where you are today is not a good predictor of your future. It is just a starting place. And that has always stuck with me. I took it to heart whenever I felt like things were too difficult or too heavy, and I kept pushing. I had a future in mind that didn't center around daily struggle, although at the time I didn't realize where trauma was playing into my life and how that would just repeat and continue. I remembered his words when I applied to various colleges in the community college system, 40 plus times, and I couldn't land a position. I kept that stack of, back then they sent you letters when you didn't get interviews, and I kept it as a reminder because the end of that story is that I did get in, because it only took one person saying yes, even if 40 had said no. I remembered those words when I was in tears walking across the bridge at San Diego State. I was exhausted trying to finish my dissertation. And my committee kept saying, well, think about this and do this. And I was just so tired. And I remembered those words. Where you are today is not a good predictor of your future. And so I kept going. So that's something that sticks with me as I face challenges today. And all of this really shaped the person I am. The mother, people at the time when I had Leonard and Christian in college, they looked down, they told me I couldn't do it. I wasn't gonna make it, right? But I knew different. And Leonard and Christian have gone on to do amazing things. Christian received a full scholarship to Florida AMU, and he's now working as a civil engineer in New York. Leonard was able to go to the community college system, get an ADT, and then serve in the Navy. And my third child that I took him in at 7, also served in the Navy and is now going to college. So they are just, I poured everything into them, and they're amazing. But it's also shaped me into the counselor, the teacher. I love my students. I love teaching in the community college system. I also teach at SDSU, and my students just feel me. I get so much energy from doing that. And then consulting in diversity, equity, inclusion, which is absolutely a passion of mine, and being an advocate. I would definitely say that the adversity, the struggle, all those times it felt overwhelming, definitely was what pushed me and allowed me to do the things and continue to allow me. And again, I'm just humbled and honored to be able to share and to talk to you all and tell you to just keep going. If it's feeling difficult, if things are feeling heavy. And I will end by just saying that one of the things I learned relatively late was the importance of self-care. I didn't recognize how much the trauma was having an impact on me. So self-care is absolutely important. I'm an advocate for therapy. Yes, I love talking to my therapist. You can't see it. I have above my head my vision board to remind myself where I'm headed and what I want to do. So take care of yourself. but don't give up. Keep pushing and find someone who's willing to be your cheerleader and your advocate, and to be there to support you on your journey. And I thank you.
Wow, Dr. Hosley, that was so powerful. Like Dr. Malaret, just thank you for being so vulnerable and peeling back and exposing those many layers of your past and who you are. And I think what you shared about your experience in the welfare office is something that my CalWORK students can really identify with in a very personal way. And so thank you for sharing that and for giving them hope.
Thank you.
Our next panelist, Shamila Kohestani, is the former captain of the Afghan women's national football team. In 2006, Shamila received the ESPN Arthur Ashe Courage Award. With a degree from Drew University, she went on to work with DT Institute, an international organization based out of Washington, D.C. that focuses on global peace and development. Shamila continues to manage projects in support of human rights and civil society in the Middle East. She is also a featured TED Talk artist and a world-renowned public speaker. Shamila.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christina and Palmer College for having me to share my story today along these incredible women panelists. I'm gonna start with the poem, Rising into My Power. I am from the mountains, from the Buddhas and the desert wind. I am from a pomegranate tree, whose beautiful seeds are like rubies, from Kohestani and Goldrum. The path I have walked has not always been easy. It has been marked by tears and struggle. I have felt hopeless and terrified, but I know that it has made me the warrior I am today. Like a cheetah, I run toward my destiny unstoppable. When I falter, I will remember that I'm a survivor and carry the strength of my mother deep inside me. I carry the mountain peaks in me and walk in harmony with the world. I see myself empowering women and young girls to fight for equality and know that while the road may be long, I will rise into my power. My dream for us is to empower women and young girls through sport and education. And I know we can get there if we all do our part, advocating for equality and access to education for all women and young girls around the world. I'm gonna give a little more background about myself. It's kind of hard to follow after Dr. Hosley, very powerful story. I had to turn my camera off for a few minutes because I just couldn't handle it emotionally. And I think that's because I connected with your story very well. I was born and raised in Afghanistan. I'm one of 7 women in my family. I have 1 brother. Currently, I reside in LA, and I work as a program manager for an international development organization, as Christina mentioned. I moved to the United States in 2008 when I got the opportunity to study abroad here. Before moving to America, I lived in Kabul and played soccer for the Afghan women's national soccer team. I was one of the first few girls who started the first Afghan women's national soccer team with the help of the Afghan Football Federation after the fall of the Taliban regime in 2001. I was the first captain of the soccer team, and it was the greatest honor to represent Afghanistan on the world stage by playing a game I loved so much. My teammates and I were delighted to have the opportunity to play sport and get an education after being deprived of our fundamental rights for 5 years during the Taliban regime. However, while this was such an exciting opportunity, it was certainly not easy, and I was faced with much adversity. I was in third grade when the Taliban took control of Afghanistan in 1995, changing my life and the life of many fellow Afghans. I was too young to understand the meaning of the vast changes happening around me. But I was able to understand the pain and hardship my parents endured to ensure our family's survival. As time passed, I realized that as a young girl, I had no. My basic rights were taken and held captive by the Taliban. The right to play sports, the right to education, the right to express my thoughts, and the right to go outside without having my brother or father to escort me. The most basic freedoms like walking on the street, listening to beautiful music, and reading books were all taken from me. I know that living in America, this can be difficult to imagine, but I was not able to simply listen to music, watch TV, go to school, walk alone in the park. So just imagine like living in a country that basically government control all aspects of your life and you cannot do what you love to do. But still, think about doing all of that, knowing that if you get caught, it will destroy you and your family. I lived in fear, which is no way to truly live. I spent 5 years of my life living under the Taliban rule, and I still clearly remember how unbearable it was for me and the people of Afghanistan. Although it has been 19 years, I'm still overcome with fear when I think about life back then. I see that I lived under the Taliban regime, but that's not the truth. The truth is that I was hungry, I was scared, I was beaten, I was stifled, I was abused. I had no joy, no hope, no freedom. I did not truly live under the Taliban regime. I merely survived. And that's how I look at my story and my childhood. During the Taliban's era of control, women were not allowed to work outside the house. And due to limited opportunity, my father could not work either. So in order to survive, my sister and I became the breadwinner of the family by embroidering burqas and scarves at home for the next 5 years. My sister provided for our family, and I will always admire them for their unparalleled work ethic and sacrifice. It is that very work ethic that led me to go back to school once the Taliban fell, and today one is a successful nurse and the other a respected doctor. That work ethic also inspired me to further my own education and career, and is the reason I'm speaking bring to you all today. The hardship I experienced at a young age inspired me to fight for my rights and break social barriers that has always limited what I can and cannot do as a woman. The Taliban tried to silence women, but for me, they did the opposite. They ignited a passion in me to ensure that all women have the right to an education, to their opinions, and to express those opinions safely. When the Taliban regime fell in 2001, I finally had a chance to test out my newfound freedom. And with that, I fell in love with the game of soccer. It's a sport that was absolutely forbidden for women to play under the Taliban regime. However, while there was still risk in playing, the pros outweighed any of the cons for me. Soccer is a sport that built my confidence and empowered me. It made me feel like I was strong, I was brave, equal, all the things that had not been felt by women in my society for years. Soccer built my self-esteem and made me realize that nothing is impossible. Playing soccer was more than just a game for me. By playing soccer, I was challenging patriarchy, dismantling gender roles, and breaking societal barriers that had historically limited what women can and cannot do in my country. While there were so many positive gains from playing soccer, there was also great obstacles I had to face while playing a game I loved so much. The Taliban no longer ruled, but a patriarchal society still existed. And the rules, the cultural attitudes towards women remained almost as strong as when the Taliban were in charge. People humiliated me and my teammates over and over again and tried to convince us to give up playing soccer, but I never did. I used your argument as a fuel for the passion I have for the sport. Their opposition actually made me stronger, braver, and only made me want to work harder to ensure that it would be less difficult for future generation of women to find this inner strength and independence I just had begun to experience. My teammates and I were constantly threatened, but we refused to give up playing soccer. We accepted the challenges, not just for ourselves, but for the other women that we represented, and we wanted to give hope. It wasn't only about playing soccer anymore. It was about us having the rights to practice our basic fundamental rights. I will never forget that. I was playing soccer at the same very stadium where women had been executed for moral crimes, such as escaping from abusive husbands. It was this terrible history that motivated me to fight for women's rights and to become an advocate for women everywhere. Soccer in a way became an outlet for my emotion, anger, and frustration, and everything else that I had felt. But playing soccer in a team with girls from all over Afghanistan and various ethnic tribes helped me to understand that there is value in every single person and that everyone deserves to live a full and happy life, regardless of their race, gender, ethnicity, or religion. Soccer and education give me the ability to look at the world from a completely different perspective. My experience as a woman in sport has given me the determination and the spirit that I have needed to call upon many times in my life. The game of soccer also taught me accountability, dedication, hard work, and perseverance. These are traits that I have carried with me throughout my life. Soccer was the tool that empowered me, and when you empower a woman, you empower a nation. So a lot of people ask me, how did I do what I did while living in a country that as a woman, you have no rights? My answer has been always very easy in a way if you think about it. So I was too young to understand the consequences of a lot of the things I did. But I was so tired of not having all the rights that my brother had just because I was a woman. So I said to myself, I live in a country that unless I ask for my rights, I fight for my rights, it will never be given to me. So that was the mentality I had at a young age. Always ask for it, fight for it to get it. You don't wait around. So every time I run into issues, for example, when I wanted to play soccer, there was no women's national team, no women play soccer in Afghanistan. So for me, it was like either I'm gonna find a way or I'm gonna make a way to start the team. And that's how I contacted the Football Federation that I want to know if there is women's team. They said, we don't have any team, but you could come and meet with us and we can start a team. So I will never forget when I walked into the Football Federation, everyone was confused and thought that I was in the wrong place because a woman was never seen at the Football Federation. And I had to explain that, no, I'm here for a reason, because I want to play soccer. So I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shamila. I mean, your determination and your sacrifice in order to benefit the next generation is truly remarkable. Thank you so much. Our next panelist, Amal Kassir, was born and raised in Denver, Colorado, but lived in Syria for several years. Her name means hope in Arabic. She was born to Melissa in Iowa, German convert to Islam, and Mohammed Kassir, a Syrian. After attending community college, Amal graduated from the University of Colorado. She currently gives tours around the United States, reciting poetry and giving TED Talks. In her poetry, she reflects on how the Syrian civil war has affected her. During the 2009 Gaza war, she wrote a poem reflecting on its destruction. After Donald Trump signed Executive Order 13769 in 2017, limiting immigration, Amal led protests against the order. Amal.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. What a pleasure and honor it is to be here among such fierce women. Really, some of these stories just left me breathless, and I'm very thankful to be here. And you know, the word leadership, it's a very uncomfortable word sometimes. And I think that's the imposter syndrome that a lot of us feel often. I see some heads of like these mighty women shaking, and it's just so wild to think about. But I think I should begin with this poem. And might I say, I had so much fun with this piece, and the poet in me definitely came out. So I'm sorry if it's like way longer than expected. So that's called Rising into My Power. I am from the dusty chandelier that casted rainbows across the heart of my home. From collections of bugs in glass cups of water and a stuffed cat secretly in my desk in a foreign country. I am from the strawberry plant I grew, picked before it was ripe, whose time was cut short, much like the refugee children and my family members, 6,799 miles across the ocean. I'm from Beit el-Qasir and the Berganzel Miller households. The path I have walked has not always been easy. It has been marked by burnt down homes and wars I could not stop. I have felt helpless and hopeless, but I know that it has made me both faithful and powerful in the end. Like a caterpillar, I walk into my transformation not knowing what's on the other side. And when I falter, I will remember that I am a survivor and carry the strength of my ancestors' prayers deep inside of me. I carry winds full of whispers of good wishes in me and walk in harmony with the world. I see myself healing what's broken inside me and all around me. And I know that while the road may be long, I will rise into my power. My dream, my wish, my hope for us is that we find oneness. And I know that we can get there if we listen within. Thank you. This was such a special exercise. Now, I am a poet, in case that didn't come across yet, but the power of words, I mean, it's indescribable what it can do. It can change lives. It can transform adversity into something else. It was a woman in Colorado who told me she got her PhD in trauma literature. And she said that the difference between a victim and a survivor is the story that they choose to tell. And our stories are powerful. And the words we dress them with will determine the energy we seek in this world around us. I originally did not want to be a poet. In fact, when I was 7 years old, I was living in Syria and my dream was to become an artist, a painter. And I remember the day that I realized that this didn't come naturally to me. And I wish I had an adult somewhere who could have told me like, hey kid, just keep at it. But I actually hosted a funeral for my sketchbook. And I stood there at the trash, like with the sketchbook in my hands, weeping to myself, this little girl, very dramatic. And I stuck it in the garbage and I gave up on that dream. And it was a very like ritualistic giving up of a dream. And, you know, growing up, I never really reflected on it until recently, how our childhood, how our youth will shape us and kind of prepare us for the fierceness that will be required of us when it is time to fight back. No one really wants to be a hero, but sometimes we have to be, right? And when I was growing up in Syria, so like it was said, I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado, where we had the luxuries of ranch dressing and Toys R Us. And I took those as an American kid very seriously. But then after September 11th, we were swept off and taken to Syria because my father felt that in the midst of all the chaos, you know, we got rocks thrown through our family business. People were harassing my mother constantly, telling her to go back to her country. And I'm sure they didn't mean Iowa when they said that. There was a lot of like unsettledness, and my father felt it was so necessary for his children to learn what their culture is instead of hearing about it on the media, and that's going to depict these angry, harsh, mean, screaming Arab men who are burning flags. You know, that is not how my dad wanted us to see ourselves. And to prevent that sort of self-loathing that a lot of young Muslim Americans who grew up, we're called the 9/11 generation in the literature. A lot of them have those sentiments. But my dad, he sent us to Syria so that we would know. We would know where we came from. We would know who we were on that second half. Now, keep in mind, just because we were in Syria, we still had meatloaf and hummus on the same table. My mother is American, my mother tongue is English, and so there is no way that I am not both. And when we were living in Syria, I had 6 first days of school. And being an American in the Middle East was a strange experience. When the United States began the bombing of Iraq, I believe it was in 2003, we had to be evacuated from school. And literally there were like F-16s flying over our little 8-year-old heads. And like kids in school would come up to me and be like, your country's doing this, you're responsible for this. And so having to kind of grapple with these multiple identities at such a young age, it set the tone for the rest of my life. And I think since a young age, one of my first experiences of struggle was this sense of belonging. And belonging is tough. It's tough because half Arab, half white, not really belonging anywhere, right? When you check the boxes on the census, you're supposed to put white. There is no box for Arab. And you're not treated as such, and you don't really know where to go, but you also know you have the privilege of light skin, but you also know that you're not quite there. And it's this strange dwindling place. And that's really where the birth of poetry came from. Having to sort of realize this dwindling could send me into the dark places if I didn't start writing. So back to my 6 first days of school. I was held back in 2nd grade, back to 1st grade, because I didn't speak the Arabic language. Very difficult to make friends and figure out things. And when I came back to Syria, or came back to the United States from Syria when I was 10 years old, there was a lot of relief to be home. And it's never good to have regrets, right? But again, I wish somebody shook this little girl and said, embrace the time you have because it will not be there later. I was in French class at Smoky Hill High School in Aurora, Colorado, checking my phone when I shouldn't have, reading Al Jazeera. And that's when the first news of the Syrian uprising hit the screens. And I even went home and I asked my dad about it, like, Baba, what do you think this is all about? What's gonna happen? Every Syrian I knew was like, don't even worry, nothing's gonna happen. It's not gonna be bad. I mean, look what happened in Libya, their dictator fell. Look what happened in Egypt, their dictator fell. And, you know, we have the Arab Spring, the hope, right? And then this violence started to manifest. Stories that were so obscene to our human imaginations. And it was wild because you went from just, you know, hearing about what's happening, you know, maybe in Palestine, hearing what's happening in Afghanistan, hearing what's happening in Iraq, different parts around the world, and, you know, you never think it's going to be. And then there were stories of 13-year-old boys beaten, battered, and bruised, showing up dead on their family's footsteps. Family members, the first member of my family to have been killed in this war in Syria was my 13-year-old second cousin, who was sniped in the back of her head while she was eating breakfast with her family. The regime then shot the mother in the face and detained the 2 men. And since that day, which was almost 10 years ago, we still do not know where they are. We have lost 49 members of our family since the start of the war in Syria. And there was that identity dichotomy that comes back from when I was a child, where we had to realize or had to make a decision as children or as privileged Americans whose fridges were always full, thank God, who had no bombs falling on them, thank God, who the worst that we had to deal with was a president endorsing hate, thank God, right? We learned to be gracious. We learned to be thankful for the oppression that we experienced here in this country. And it almost like fizzled the lines between our personal experiences and the war in Syria. And it was hard to figure out where that line was. And we lived with a collective guilt. My father is from Syria. He was born there. He was raised there. And my father, I think the hardest part was seeing what the war did to him. My dad grinded his teeth down to his gums over the duration of the first couple of years. The dentist said he'd never seen anything like it. Something that rapid, that quick, and it was from the stress. My dad had decided that it was a duty to watch every single YouTube video that came out of that war. And when I say that the violence there stretched the imagination into the darkest realms, I mean it. My brother said it once. He said, if you look up the word Syria in Arabic on YouTube, a different world will appear and you will not be able to sleep. And it was YouTube that gave us nightmares. It was stories of our family and our friends and our neighbors from overseas that were giving us nightmares. And my dad drank it and drank it and drank it because he felt like if he could not endure with his body, he would endure with his eyes what was going on. And it was tough. And it took a toll on his marriage. And it took a toll on our relationship with him. And it was hard to find a balance, right? How do you embrace a cause outside of yourself while still honoring what's within? And I'm 26, I'm about to be 26 in a few months. And I think the biggest lesson, I'm gonna start with this biggest lesson and then go back into the chronology again. But you cannot pour from an empty cup. And I think women are professionals at somehow magically making water from nothing to pour into other people's cups, but we cannot pour from an empty cup. And we have to make sure we honor ourselves and our peace of mind, our spiritual, emotional, mental peace in order to give to the world, because the world will render you empty. So when I was 16, because of the war in Syria, my career as a poet began. And, you know, again, it wasn't something I'd planned. I didn't necessarily have mentorship for this. And if there's one thing that I would encourage everybody, especially the youth, it is to find a mentor. It is to find an elder who can guide you, because the wisdom of our elders will make the path so much easier. And we need the elders. So I was traveling all over the country and telling these stories about what was happening in Syria and making such profound, beautiful connections with people and building a resume. And, you know, it was just I'm so lucky. Alhamdulillah, praise be to God, to the Almighty, to have been able to share and to really change people's hearts. But then I would come home with an empty cup. You know, and feel, again, this imposter syndrome. My gosh, the imposter syndrome. If anyone has a cure for this, please let me know. But we'd come home and we'd feel like stories aren't enough. Stories aren't enough. We're not changing the world. No, we did our part. We did winter aid projects. You know, we raised money where we could. But at the end of the day, no matter what I was doing, I was going home to a hotel room or to my house, and my cousins were dying and my aunts were starving and my cousins were being detained, and it was so much guilt. That was a difficult thing to reconcile, and we're still working on reconciling. When I say we, I think it's the collective us who are outside of the situation, you know, but still we carry it in our hearts. But I went back, you know, I got my education, I did what I could, and I'm still doing what I could. But I think when things really started to hit me, to sort of collapse in, you know, we dealt with a few things personally in the family. My house burned down in 2017, and it was 1 week before that. My parents, they had been divorced at this point. And my father, his wife gave birth to a child who was 6 weeks early, or 8 weeks early, sorry. The child, typically a kid when he's born, if you don't know, is between like 6 to 8 pounds. This little baby was 1 pound, 15 ounces. He was the size of a chicken shawarma sandwich from my family's restaurant. That's all we could compare him. We're like, that's number 4 on the sandwich menu right there. And this teeny little thing, they said that in their entire experience in the NICU, they had never, ever seen a child this small have the ability to breathe without a machine. This teeny little baby's lungs were so strong. And surely, even though we were so worried and he was so small and there's going to be struggles when he grows up and he's going to be developmentally delayed, this kid had fierce lungs. And there is something to be said about that. Well, like I said, he was born November 26th, and exactly 1 week later, the house burned down. Now, if it was not for the birth of that child, my father and his wife would have been inside the house. And the fire, it began next to the front door, which like swept all the way up and literally boiled the doorknob of his bedroom door. There would have been no way to go outside except through the window on a second story. And the firemen kept saying, thank God no one was home. Thank God no one was home. Because the fire also fell into the basement where my brother slept. And he had been there an hour earlier. I mean, this night was like a night of miracles. You're watching your house burning down. And the whole time we're thinking Syria. The whole time we're thinking Syria. We're like, thank God we're safe. It wasn't bombs. We have house insurance. Firemen said the word house insurance more than any other word that night. But we were grateful. But I remember when we were staying in like a hotel room, we had to stay there for about a month. I could hear my father weeping upstairs in prayer in the last third of the night. And again, it's like when we go through these struggles, it's not even us who are feeling the unburden. It's what my father is carrying that made this hurt so much. But again, the miracle baby made it so everybody was safe, and that story could have been something else. And then about a month later, my aunt called. She said that her house had just gotten bombed in Syria. She said no one was hurt. A bomb came and swiped off the side of the balcony. There are no walls in the house, so they're gonna have to leave. And my grandma kept saying, or my aunt kept saying, she's like, we don't want to leave because the children have school. We don't want to leave because the children have school. And she kept saying that in her voice message to us. And we were just, again, you're just so like, gratitude is the thing that we have to do with our privilege. We have to be grateful with it. Gratitude is, I think, the one thing that made it so that no matter how bad it got, we could be thankful for where we were. And so all these things are happening. On one thing right after the other. My family in the community had the reputation for the family that had gone through it, you know? But it never felt so overwhelmingly impossible because we felt like we had to carry the weight for my father. And that's another thing that happens. And I know a lot of third generation kids have this experience as well, where we are inheriting the trauma of our elders. We are responsible for carrying the pain of those who came before us. And we have to figure out how to separate us, how to make sure that it does not fill our insides and hurt us as we carry it. It's like a suitcase that you should be able to put down sometimes. And I think just to show my gratitude to my father, you know, I do try to carry it and write about it and speak about it. But to come to the one thing that I think has been more difficult than anything I've faced in my life, and I know this was mentioned by all the women, comes down to the mental health, the mental wellness. A woman's mental wellness is the most sacred thing, because when a woman is unwell, an entire village will be unwell. An entire future generation may be unwell. It's a lot of responsibility for the one who carries life. And I realized at a certain point that my greatest wars were not the wars outside, it was the wars inside of me. It was the war of fear. When my spiritual word was given to me by a speech coach a while back, she said, courage is your word. Courage is at the cornerstone of everything you do. And I thought to myself in my 20s, why am I so afraid then? Why am I so afraid? Why am I so afraid of dying without a purpose, of falling into this depression and not being able to get out? Why am I so afraid? And there was always, again, the imposter syndrome, feeling like we're never, ever doing enough. Our value being directly tied to the work that we put out in the world. That is a thing that we have to unlearn. If our value comes directly with our output, then on the days we put nothing out, we feel like we are empty and we are nothing. That has to go. Finding the inherent love within ourselves. This term I learned from my therapist, she said radical self-love. We need to show ourselves radical self-love. It is revolutionary, it is fierce, it is fire, and it is the greatest war we will ever fight. Being able to love ourselves in a world constantly trying to convince us that we are powerless, that we don't matter, that someone or something is bigger than us, that we are helpless, that we can be hopeless. Radical self-love is the greatest message that I have. And I think obviously with that message comes its opposite. Adversity is such a gift, ironically, right? It's so tough. But there is this belief in the Islamic tradition that God will never give you a burden that you cannot bear. And that's terrifying. I remember once when I was driving between two cities during another height of crisis in my life, and I pulled over at a rest stop and I leaned back. I'm like, damn, if I'm surviving this, what the heck is about to come next? If I'm trying to get strength right now, what is this preparing me for? And I think life will never stop its test. But if we have our radical self-love, if we have the strength to at least acknowledge what we're struggling with, and if we have the strength to pull back and rest and fill our cups, even if that means stopping around the world around us, I think we must do it. Adversity is why leaders exist. It's why change is made, and it's why love actually makes a difference. If it wasn't for love, the war in Syria, it wouldn't matter. Losing people doesn't matter unless love is at the heart of it, right? Humanity and love and kindness and compassion, these are the things that make the adversity all the worse, but all the more rewarding. So I think that's at the end of my time, but I am supposed to read one poem. Do I have time for that?
Yes, please do.
Awesome. All right. This is a poem I wrote actually right around Donald Trump, which feels like a very distant memory, right? Ever since Twitter's been quiet, it's like, whoa, what happened? But I wrote this poem and it's about my beloved America. And it was inspired when I went to the Grand Canyon. I was like, wow, I'd never seen anything like this in all the places in the world that I visited. All right, this is a poem called Dementia. My mama drank the Rocky Mountain water while I was in her womb. My fetus birthmarked in US landmarks, my spine jagged like the Western Slope. My America taught me what it means to carve grand canyons out of rivers. Taught me that even shallow waters can shape a country. That here, you get to spangle your scars with stars. Write constitutions in Arabic, translate the Bill of Rights into every single language. America taught me that even shallow waters can shape a country. So when the river got infected with some bigotry and blood, she was swept up in this flash flood confusion. The stripes on her flag slipped off into a blindfold and someone put bullet holes where her star should be. She would stop us and frisk us like we weren't American, like she had dementia, like she forgot she created me. Symptoms of dementia include disorientation, She thought she was painting the American flag in the blue, bruised, blood red of the Muslim corpses on the concrete, and she never called it a hate crime, just a parking dispute. Symptoms of dementia include forgetfulness in the evening hours. A white hood is the same color as a Black man's skin when the sun goes down. Maybe that's why the Klansmen set their fires at night, so that they can see the difference. Symptoms of dementia include inability to speak or understand. America stopped speaking with me. She said her anchor man could do it for me. How could she understand me? Symptoms of dementia include making things up. She said I was a terrorist, an extremist, a sand and word raghead. She said, I'm not American. Like Denver General Hospital doesn't have my birth certificate. Like my spine isn't made of an aspen tree. Like I'm not made of the same roots as all my neighbors. My mama always taught me to pick things up when they fell apart. And as the branches of this family tree are collapsing, I am doing my best to hold it back together, because if you pull one aspen tree from the ground, the whole forest will feel their roots severed. America got dementia. She doesn't remember the Rocky Mountain water my mama drank, but she said so herself. Even shallow waters can shape a country. I'm almost certain that's why she put these Colorado rivers in my blood. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Palomar College. I appreciate you for having me.
Wow, Amal. I'm just speechless. Your word crafting is just, it's so beautiful and it's so vivid. Thank you so much for being here today. Well, we have a little bit of time if anyone has any questions for the panel. I think the best way to go about this is to type it in the chat, and I will read the first few if you want to direct them towards specific panelists or the entire panel as a whole. Let's see. All right, I have a question. There were also a lot of very positive words talking about how phenomenal you all are. From Miranda Modis for the entire panel. What are our next steps? That's a good question. Thank you, Miranda. Why don't we go in order of who spoke? So Doctora Johanna Malaret, do you have anything? Big question. It's a heavy question.
Yeah. I'm just so blown away by just, all the speakers and Amal's story, but the poetry is just phenomenal. Isn't quite enough of a word to capture the fabulousness. What are our next steps? What are my next steps? I mean, the simplest, which is often the most difficult, is to just live, is to just be, is to just continue through the struggle and to continue to thrive, right? So that's like on the more spirit, soul level. Practical is I need to make my visions come to fruition, so I need to do what I need to do so that I can get to getting that private practice, so yeah, just got to do the do. And like a lot of the women said in varying different ways, is you have to do you, and you have to believe in you, and you have to fill the cup.
Thank you, Johanna. Dr. Tycee Hosley, did you have anything you'd like to share?
my next steps. Well, Amal said something that struck with me. Actually, all of the panel did. I'm just like blown away myself.
Mhm.
I definitely still struggle with seeing myself as a leader. I have people all the time telling me, you know, oh my God, you're great. You should do this. You should do that. Have you thought about this? And they're pulling me, and I'm like, it's a struggle for me still because I don't necessarily see myself that way. And so I need to quiet those voices that say, Tycee, that's not for you. That's for someone else. And to step into my greatness. I truly feel like I have been blessed to be put in a position to help other people. Like that is my life's purpose, to support, to empower, to encourage. So to do that, that's my work. That's what I have to do, is see myself the way other people see me. And it's a process. And I see the growth, I see the change. I see myself being less willing to be silent about things, to have the courage to speak up when something comes up and not worry about the consequence or what people are thinking about me as I do it. So, and I love the idea of the radical self-love. I just love it. I'm embracing that part and making sure that there is something in my cup, because I can't give to others if there's nothing there. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hosley. I feel like imposter syndrome is that elephant in the room that we don't talk about, yet it's so common, and at the same time it's so debilitating. It really casts a shadow on what we're capable of doing and who we are. And it was the theme at last year's conference. For those of you who attended it, every single woman spoke to imposter syndrome in some shape or form. And there are these accomplished, powerful, educated women. And so, yeah, in that area, the struggle is so real. Shamila, do you have anything that you'd like to share as far as what are our next steps?
Yeah, sure. I think I will start what you and Dr. Hosley said about the imposter syndrome. Abel, you're right. I think I always express this. People who know me know that how much I love me and I love myself, because the only way I can take care of my family and I can give back is if I fully love myself. But from what I heard from you and many panelists, I always think that, and I say I love myself, but not to the point where I should take care of myself mentally. Everyone is talking about therapy. I think with so much trauma that I have experienced and the adversity made me so much stronger. And then coming to America after missing 5 years of basic education and then not even knowing how to write an essay. And here I'm in college, staying in the library until 3 a.m. trying to learn words and dictionary before I can do my homework. And I don't even know how to type because I have never owned a computer. So, and looking at that, I am very strong, I feel like, for everything I have endured. And I always refuse to see a therapist or talk about it or talk about my trauma, because I'm like, I'm strong. I know who I am. I know what are my issues. So I shouldn't be, going to really work on it, because I always think about it. I survived Taliban. So what is going to kill me in America? But I don't really think about it that for my own health, to have a balanced life here, I need to do those next steps for me. Often, because my entire family still left in Afghanistan, and if many of you, I'm sure, know about the conflict going on there, I still go to bed every night thinking if I wake up the next day, my family will be alive. Sorry. So my husband, who's an American, always tell me I need to see a therapist because he doesn't feel like I'm giving all of my love to him. He gets left over because I'm not able to process everything. Because I go to bed guilty that I have food, that I have access to water, I have access to basic education. And my parents goes to bed in the cold because they don't have heat, they don't have electricity. So, sorry. Those are my next step, that I need to create a balance in my life here in America to be able to create my own family and give them the love they deserve. Because my husband doesn't deserve this. You know, I should be able to give all my love to him just the way I give it to my family. But I'm so focused giving back to my family back home, seeing losing family members, seeing people dying every day, like Emil said, watching these videos. There are times I don't even watch news, but then I feel guilty again because I'm trying to avoid it purposely and not care. So it's like this trauma that I have been carrying, that I even have dreams that I lose my father, or a friend of mine is dying in a suicide attack. So like every morning I get up, my husband says, don't look at your phone. But I do because I'm so anxious to know that my family is okay. So sorry, that was a lot to throw, but my next steps are to work on me, knowing that how much I love me, but I need to take those important steps, knowing that I have experienced adversity, I made it, I survived. Those adversity shape me who I am and made me who I am. I do see myself as a survivor, as a warrior. I never ever see myself as a victim. And the imposter syndrome is real because whenever people introduce me, or I go to events, they say the great things I have done, I blush and I cringe because I'm like, oh, is that me? It's kind of hard to accept all of that, and that is the next step, to really love me and really take those important steps for my own mental wellness, for my family here and my family back home, so I'm able to process everything and there is a balance.
Thank you so much, Shamila. Amal, do you have any next steps?
Yeah, Shamila, that was so heavy. Thank you so much for sharing. And I hope that somehow you find that balance, but it's always going to be like a wobbling balance. I pray for your family. And if there are any organizations that we can support, that can support your family, please let us know. I was going to real quick just say, I have a sticky note that says radical self-love. I'm a huge advocate of sticky notes and putting things in your vision so that you know how to manifest what you need to manifest. There's like 1,000 sticky notes all over my room. But as for next steps, and I took that question as what are the next steps for everybody here in the audience? And I have 2 steps if you don't even know where to begin in the process of leadership. And it's number 1, honor yourself, know where you come from, know who your community is, know what the issues facing your community are, and then go to your neighbors and see what they're experiencing, what they're doing. And I think that makes it a lot easier because, again, know what is in your cup in order to be able to go into your neighbors, your communities. I see a lot of burnout in the activist community where they're fighting so hard for causes outside of their home, and they don't even see what's happening inside. And their marriages are falling apart, their relationships, things like that. We have to have that balance, just like Shamila said. We have to make sure that we are able to take care of the inward and the outward. So in summary, number 1, know yourself, honor yourself, figure out what's going on in you and your community, get to know your neighbors and serve your neighbors. Yeah, that's my answer.
Mhm. Thank you, Amal. So we have about 8 minutes left, and I see a lot of questions coming through now, and I apologize that we have a limited amount of time for them, but we did want to allow for small breakout sessions so that the audience could share their own rising into my power poems because I think they're so powerful, especially when you say them out loud. But I do have one last question from Afifa Zaman. And she said, Amal shared a powerful thought. Adversity can be a gift. I'm wondering if the panelists can share more about how they transformed adversity into present gifts. And I know Shamila spoke to this a little, but if you all would like to expand on that. I'm not going to go in order, but if someone, that question speaks to them and they feel compelled to share, you could go ahead and unmute yourself.
Gosh, I was thinking I want to answer. I know we're pressed for time. I would not be who I am without adversity. I mean, as I look back over that journey I took you through, and all of those things, and still today, I talked about the multiple realities. Every day that I go to work, particularly in this time that we're talking a lot about anti-racism and equity and having conversations about race, every day there is more trauma. Whether it's something that a colleague said or something I saw on the news, what allows me to deal with that and keep going is that I've built up resilience from the adversity. So it doesn't matter what comes my way. That resilience allows me to keep going. And I think it's about a mindset, right? It's about a mindset and that power of your mind and just knowing whatever it is, whatever the circumstance, remember that's happening right now, not a good indication of where you can go, not a good indication of where you will be. Just keep moving forward. And adversity, I would say adversity has made me into a strong version of myself, right? That's what it has done for me.
Thank you, Dr. Hosley. Do any of the other panelists want to speak to that question?
I was thinking about Afifa's question and one of the first things that kind of came to mind is, again, a duality, right? Like yin and yang, like you can't have day without night, you can't have the sun without the moon, you can't have the dark without the light, you can't have joy without sadness. And so the way to get, I believe, to seeing adversity as a gift is embracing it. And that means embracing the challenge, the pain, the trauma, because that also leads to seeing how it is a gift and how it could bring joy in maybe unexpected ways or newness, expansion, and so it's like that onion layer, right, of just taking things apart, and some layers are really nasty and some layers are stinky and some layers are beautiful and glimmery and shiny. I mean, so it's all of it together. And so the way to achieve that is to embrace that. And it's not easy, and it's painful, and it's messy, and it's ugly. But a really great author, woman, mental health advocate, Brene Brown. I'm a very visual person and I like words and you know, one that stands out for me of her is that I think it's either the magic is in the mess or messiness is magic, something along those way. I just fumbled her quote. But yeah, I mean, I think that's at the crux of it. So be messy and be magical.
All right, thank you so much, Doctora Malaret. So we are out of time for questions, and I apologize. I was scrolling through and there's some really, really good questions. I wish we had more time for them. But at this point in time, we're going to turn off the recording.